What if your prospect could literally close themselves on your offer? No pushing, no awkward pitch. That's exactly what I broke down on this recent workshop with my clients. I walked them through the exact consult method, the questioning framework, the reverse selling technique, all of it. And I'm giving you the full thing right here. So whether you're a coach or you're a consultant or you're running any kind of high ticket sales call, this will change how you sell. Let's get into it. Hello, everyone. Welcome to our workshop today. Today is the workshop on the consultative close. You would have clicked on this workshop if you're a coach or a consultant or even a salesperson who wants to run sales conversations that feel transparent, ethical, powerful, where instead of pushing the sale, you guide someone to recognize the gap between the life that they're living and the life they expected that they would have by now, which results in them selling themselves to you. So the other reason that you might have clicked on this workshop is you might have had bad experiences with sales training, or sales training has kind of felt hard to put your fingers on and figure out exactly what's going on. A lot of the feedback that we get from our model is like, oh, this is the thing that sequentially makes sense. Like it's clear what the steps are. So my goal for you today is to walk away with something that feels tangible, that you can use, that you can follow the bouncing ball so that you can make more sales, obviously. And just excuse me while I have a little bit of a cold. So about me, I've been coaching sales professionals and coaches since 2016. Kind of makes me part of the old guard in the online training space. And I just think that's important to say with, at the moment, there's a rise in the sales trainer or the sales guru. But this is not new to me. I've been doing this since 2016. So that's nearly a decade. It's been my 10th year. My background is in human behavior profiling. I've spent years working as a career salesperson. So this is not just teaching sales from theory. I've actually been on the ground doing it. Over the years, I've helped thousands of coaches, consultants, and sales reps close millions of dollars in deals through better sales conversations. We've created our own method called the consult method, which you're going to learn about today. And obviously the Neuro-Linguistic questions playbook, which you should already have a copy of if you're on this list. So the last thing is this work combines a bespoke mix of human behavior, buying psychology, and real world sales experience to help our prospects sell themselves instead of being pitched. So the big idea today is a couple of big ideas that I want to convey, which number one is getting prospects to sell themselves on our offer instead of pitching is the core premise. The reason why that's the core premise is because it's much more convincing to have a prospect tell us why they want something rather than us telling them why they want something. And this is largely due to the way that our brains work is we have this little bullshit detector in the back of our head, where if someone tells us something, we're less likely to believe it versus us seeing it for ourselves. And so this same human behavior principle applies to sales as well. If we tell ourselves that this is the thing that we need, it's much more influential than us telling someone else or someone else telling us that we need it. So the second thing here is, and this is to help with the narrative that sales can feel manipulative or gross, but we're not installing anything. We're not manipulating anything. We're not twisting anyone into doing something that they don't already want to do. What we're doing through a sales process like this is we're understanding and uncovering what is their driving motivators, what is their problem that they're experiencing, why it is that they want to change. And this is really important, especially for coaches and consultants who can sometimes worry about feeling salesy, is most of the time the people that you're speaking to, the reason why they've inquired with you is because they have some kind of problem below the surface. And so our job is to uncover that problem. And through uncovering that problem, people naturally tend to gravitate towards wanting to solve that problem. So the third one here is this process is completely transparent and ethical. This is how people make decisions. So what I'm sharing with you today, you could literally show someone in front of you. So you could have I actually encourage my clients to write this down. We have this little model that I'll show you in a moment. You can write this down. You could have it in front of your prospect and just say, this is what I'm doing. And it would be completely fine. It's a decision-making framework. This is how people make decisions and it's completely transparent. So you don't have to worry about any hangups around you manipulating or anything like that. This is totally clean. We're also, the other idea is we're leaning towards what they already know and illuminating it for them. So what that means is we're shining a light on the reasons below the surface that are motivating them to want to make a decision. And the idea of doing this is when we show someone this is what's going on for you, or we highlight it for them, they naturally want to close that gap. So for example, in this workshop, you've come to this workshop because on some level right now, clients aren't buying your services at the rate that you want to. So that's kind of a reality, number one. And then the ideal scenario where you'd like it to be is either having more clients buy your services, charging more, or making more revenue because you recognize that there's a gap in the your ability to convey the value of what you do to your clients. So there's this little gap here, and that gap, excuse me, is what has motivated you to sign up to a webinar and show up and give an hour of your time to come and be on this class, which I totally appreciate. So thank you for that. And also on that note, like, because you're here and you spent an hour, with everything that's going on right now, I'm going to make sure this is hella valuable for you, right? You're actually going to walk away with some stuff. This is not a big pitch fest. No, there's not some hidden pitch coming at the end of this class. This is just value that we deliver maybe every month, every fortnight. It's been a while since we ran our last one. But we just like to drop this in for Playbook buyers, just to be like, hey, this is how you take it deeper. This is how you take it further. And then if you want help, you can always reach out, and I run one-on-one coaching services to help you deploy this over an 8-week period. So the next thing here, next big idea is we want to earn the right to pitch. And so earning the right to pitch came from a mentor of mine named Sharon Pearson. Basically, she used to say, most people get really excited about like wanting to sell their services rather than being curious around why does the prospect want them in the first place. And the idea of earning the right to pitch is we put our pitch or our sales pitch towards the back end of the conversation, and we focus most of the call, at least 60% of the call, towards figuring out why does the person want this thing and what is going on that drove them to speak to us in the first place. And the reason why we call it earn the right is in most calls that I review, it's 80% pitching and 20% about the client. And so we want to flip this dynamic where it's 80% about figuring out what's going on behind the scenes, what is driving them to be here right now, so that we can earn the right to pitch. So that the prospect literally turns around and goes, yeah, well, how do I work with you? That's the ideal scenario. I would consider successful sales conversation is when the person says to you, this is fantastic. Thank you so much. How do we work with you? Then the last thing here is a great sale ends on a thank you. This is another zinger of a quote from my first mentor, where she said, a great sale ends on a thank you, which is such an interesting way to think about it. When most traditional sales is all about convincing, a great sale ends on the prospect saying, this makes sense. This is great. I'm so excited. Thank you very much. Let's do this. And this is really important because this creates a completely different type of client. And we're going to talk about this idea potentially in this class or maybe another one, where if you're a coach or consultant, there's a big difference between clients that are convinced to joining you and clients that actually want to join you because they made a decision for themselves. And we call this leaders versus followers. And so followers are people that are convinced because they can't think for themselves. And leaders are people that make decisions for themselves that they want to change. Leaders always get better results than followers because they can think for themselves. Then the last thing here that I would say is it's a mindset of curious first. And this is also really important because most sales conversations start with the thought, how do I get the sale? Not what is going on for the human in front of me. And this curious first mindset is really important if you want to do everything else that we've talked about in the list so far. And it detaches you from the need for the sale. And I think this is best explained in like a public speaking metaphor. I used to run a lot of workshops live when I was living in Melbourne, in Australia. And you'd get nervous before you went up on stage because you'd have, 50 people in a room and all your nerves would get to you. And one of the things that would happen, or the mentor shared with me is they said, the more you focus on yourself, the more nervous you're going to be. If you shift that and you focus on the audience and what they need, you're less likely to be nervous. And so this initial nerves would happen for the first 5 seconds of the workshop, but then you actually start connecting to the audience. You start thinking, what do they need? What are they here for? What do they want? And then those nerves would disappear. And this is what curiosity does. Is if you're curious about your prospect, why are they there? What problem do they have? What's going on for them? Then your nervousness about being salesy, about being coming across salesy, you're pushing all the costs, it will disappear if you lead with curiosity first. So let's move into our core content for today, which is understanding what is a sale. Now, you would have seen me reference this a couple of times, which is a sale is a gap between what someone is experiencing now and what they expected that they would be by now. So what I want you to imagine is if you were to take a rubber band, you put it between your two thumbs and you stretch it out like this. This is the gap between what someone is experiencing now and their expectation by these fireworks. That's crazy. What someone is expecting by now. And so that gap, that's a tension that is created when we understand somebody's, we call this cognitive dissonance, when we understand the person's gap between what they have right now and where they expected that they would be by now. So if we take a very practical example of this webinar today, the expectation, people who signed up for this webinar, who've joined us live, have an expectation of where they would be relative to sales. So the expectation might be, I expected that I would have more revenue by now. I expected that I would have more clients by now. I expected that sales would be easier by now. There would be some expectation that you would have that is different from your current reality. And in most cases, or in some of the extreme cases, I had this coach join, she'd had, I think, 13 sales conversations. And in those 13 sales conversations, she hadn't signed a single client. So her reality experience right now was 13 sales conversations, $0, 0 clients. And there was an emotion attached to that. There was worry, there was fear, there was scarcity, there was uncertainty. And her expectation, where she thought she would be by now, is she thought at least 3 of those people should have closed. And at a $3,000 price point, she expected that that would be $10,000 worth of revenue. That revenue would have represented a feeling. It would have felt calm. It would have felt secure. It would have felt relief, but she wasn't experiencing that. So she had this tension of her expectation of what she thought that she would have by now, plus the current reality. And that was creating this gap or this cognitive dissonance in the middle that she wanted to fill. So she booked a call. We talked about the process. And then I did an install with her, and she ended up within 8 weeks closing 3 or 4 new clients that she would not have closed otherwise. And so this is there's no sort of greater way for a coach to understand what this process is other than your understanding of what's happening right now versus the expectation. And this exists in your clients too, whether it's in a B2B sales space, whether it's in a coaching consulting space. This is the core premise behind what drives people's decisions to buy things, is they have a cognitive dissonance, a gap between what they're experiencing now and their reality of where they want it to be by now. So other ways to think about this is somebody's reality of right now are problems. So what problems are they experiencing? What is happening currently? What has happened? So if we use the sales example, what problems do they have with sales right now? Probably too many objections, probably people telling them that they're too expensive. What's happened in the past? They have had conversations that they thought were a yes, but then the person ghosted them and disappeared. What has the opportunity cost been of that? It's probably revenue measured in money, which is could be $3,000 to $4,000 a client. If they lost 3 of them, could be $12,000 to $20,000 worth of lost revenue. And there's also a cost of inaction. So what has happened because they haven't chosen to deal with this? What has happened as a result of that? And probably they've gotten to a point where the revenue is stalling, it's not growing, and it's getting tighter and tighter, and it feels harder and harder to sign clients. So on the other side, their expectation, it's made up of their future, their goals, their hopes, their dreams, their desires, the unrealized gains of what could happen. And so if we use a sales example, the expectation would look something like they desire to actually close clients. I want to sign 2 to 3 clients in the next couple of weeks. Why would they want to do that? Well, that extra revenue would go towards paying down a tax bill, or that extra revenue would go so I can reinvest into the business. That extra revenue would mean that I could go on holiday. So there is a future goal or a future expectation that we can also paint that helps us stretch this gap. Now, the more vivid the problem, or the more vivid the image that we create in both the now and the future, the larger that tension between the two rubber bands, which helps us sell our services. If we have a very high ticket service, so something that is 10, 20,000, that gap needs to be bigger. And so in a practical sales example, I have a sales rep who wants to hit $250K in the next 12 months. So he has a very big expectation. And there are other things attached to that. So he wants to pay off all of his debt. He wants to go on holiday. He wants to start investing. And so there's this big future expectation of what he would achieve if he hit that $250,000 in revenue. His current reality is he's probably only doing around $7,000 a month in commission. His conversion rates, his conversion rates are low, and he's annoyed at his performance. He knows that he has more potential to offer and that his results aren't reflecting his reality. So this for him is a big enough gap to want to invest a higher ticket amount over a longer period of time to create that outcome. And so that for him is a $250,000 outcome. There's enough pain to warrant wanting to invest. And so the reason why I'm sharing this with you is because depending on the size of your product or your offering, it will correlate to the size of the cognitive dissonance, the gap that you need to build. So why should we care about cognitive dissonance and selling this way? So the beauty of establishing cognitive dissonance in our buyers' minds is that it starts to bring them through the 5 stages of consumer awareness. So Eugene Schwartz has this marketing philosophy, which is the 5 stages of consumer awareness. And that is whenever a prospect is looking for a solution, they start off unaware, which is they're not quite sure what their problem is. They're not even sure what the solutions are. So they enter the market where they just don't even know what's going on. It's very hard to convince people here that they have a problem. But this process takes them through being unaware all the way through the 5 stages. Then the second type of people are people that are problem aware. So this is particularly what happened with you when you clicked on the registration, is you're aware that on some level there's a gap or a problem with how you see sales. And so being problem aware, you registered for the link, there was no risk. So you could come into this training to help fix that problem or become aware of a solution to fix that problem. And so ideally, the content that you learn today should give you a solution to the problem that you have so that you can then become aware of not only the solutions, but the products that exist to help solve that problem. And then obviously most aware is where you then take the action or you're on the other side of the product. And so when we sell this way with our prospects, what we're doing is when we ask the questions, we're making them aware of their own problems. When we do something called reverse selling, which I'll talk to you about in a minute, we get them to tell us what they need to solve their problem, right? And so they become solution aware. And then we present our services, which makes them product aware. So selling this way, it helps make up for bad marketing, or it helps unqualified leads become qualified leads because we're selling in a way that is not just pitching, which assumes that they are aware of our product. It helps them move through the stages of awareness. Excuse me. So when most people sell, they rush straight to the 4th stage to make their prospect product aware of their irresistible offer on their first phone call. And this is a huge mistake because we just kind of skipped 3 of the 5 levels. So I'm going to introduce you to our method today. So this is our signature process called the consult method, which holds within it this gap building that we've talked about earlier. So the consult method is a process that encapsulates everything from start to finish. It looks like this: curiosity, owning the frame, what prospects need now, help them see the future, utilize their answers, listen for objections, and end on a thank you. It's an acronym. And so one of the first things that we do, or one of the first exercises that you can do, is this is called the island exercise. So what I'd encourage you to do, I'll explain this, and you can either do this now or you can do this in your own time. But this is the first exercise that I get prospects or my clients to do to help figure out what is the problem that you solve, or what is the gap that your prospects have between what they're experiencing now and where they thought they would be by. And the reason why we call it the island exercise is we have 3 islands that I want you to imagine. Is on island 1 is all the things that suck about the prospect's situation before they work with you. Then island number 3, which is the party island, is all the things that would be great after working with you. And you and your offer sits in the middle. So let's call me sales coach, and I do training, webinars, etc. Then on the left-hand side here, you would do this for your industry, for your market, which is what sucks about the current situation relative to your product. So if we take sales training just as the most easiest example, there is a low conversion of clients into enrollments. There's too many objections. There's not enough dollars coming in. They feel salesy. They avoid sales conversations. They're winging the sales conversation, which means there is no structure. Hope is not a structure. Their sales results are inconsistent. So you would go through on this exercise and you would fill in all of the things, all of the problems that suck for your clients before they work with you. Then on the other side, this is the party island. So this is the fun island, all the things that are great after working with you. And so after sales training, someone would have a high conversion, who would have high confidence in their ability to turn curious prospects into high paying clients. They would have extra dollars to go on holidays and invest in the business. Sales would feel natural and enjoyable. They couldn't wait to sell their services. They had a repeatable, measurable process for selling. So no more winging it. And their sales results are consistent. And so by doing this for your market, you're going to start thinking in problem versus outcome language, which is really important if you're going to sell with this cognitive dissonance idea. And most people don't actually map out what problem it is that they solve. And we're actually in the process of building out an AI agent that will help you guys do this. So like, rather than jumping on a webinar and needing me, we'll have an AI agent that will be able to walk you through the coaching process of actually building this out. But I'd highly, highly encourage you to start this, if you're watching on the replay, if you're watching live, to take a moment either today, tomorrow, just to sit down and go through this exercise. Think about your market specifically, and what problems do your prospects experience? And some really good hints here is we don't just want to say like no sales, right? So if I was to say this person has no sales, that's not really describing the problem, right? It's just saying they have no sales. But what does that actually mean? It's more the symptom. It's not the root cause. So the power of this exercise is to go to the root cause, not just the symptoms. And so if you do find yourself with symptoms, which are things like, like no sales or like no clients, what is driving the no clients? What is the problem that is causing the no clients, the symptom beneath the surface? And so, yeah, that's our island exercise. So I'd highly encourage you guys to go through that as part of developing out your sales process. So the next part that we need to add to this, and this is part of the buying psychology piece, is we've talked about this difference between now and the expectation of now, and from a kind of conceptual perspective. There's another layer that we need to add to this, which is emotion and logic. And so when people make a decision, it's not just a logical decision. It's not just an emotional decision. They're using both logic and emotion. And you might have heard the phrase, people make emotional decisions and justify it with logic. That's very, very true from a human behavior perspective. And this process that I'm about to show you, or that we've been showing you, we need to activate both sides of the brain, the left and the right side, the emotion and the logical, to create the cleanest, most compelling buying response in our prospects. So this is I know this is very kind of jargony at the moment, but we'll distill this down more. And essentially, if I just flick down here, this is the best way to conceptualize it. It's in somebody's reality of now, there is emotional problems and there's logical problems. In someone's expectation of where they want it to be, there's emotional problems and logical problems. And so if we jump back to our island exercise, we can see that some of these are logical and some of these are emotional. And so what is a logical problem? Well, a logical problem is anything external that exists outside of the person. So an example of that is inconsistent sales results. It's a low conversion of clients. These are concepts that are outside of the person. Things like feeling salesy, ways that the prospect feels about their situation. If we look on the other side, a high conversion, it's not a feeling, it's a concept, right? It's a result that is happening outside of the person. High confidence is an emotion. And so what we're trying to do here with the island exercise is we want to figure out and we want to balance emotions and logics. So if we look at this one here, there's a low conversion of clients. We would go through low conversion. That's not a feeling. That's logic. So we'd go and we put the L or the E next to it so that we're figuring out which are the logical and which are the emotional. Too many objections. That's a concept. Not enough dollars. That's also a concept. They feel salesy. It's an emotion. They're avoiding sales conversations. That's probably both logic and emotion, because the emotion of avoidance, but then they're not doing sales conversations. So that's logic and emotion. They're winging sales conversations. So that's logical. Sales results are inconsistent, so that's logical. And so we're starting to notice a pattern here is there's actually not enough emotion. So now we need to think about, well, what are some of the other emotions that our prospects might be feeling regarding bad sales? So they could feel hopeless, they could feel confused, they could feel uncertain. And so now I've rounded out my island exercise with some emotions that our prospects might be feeling. And the question that you're asking yourself is, how is this island exercise relevant to sales conversations? Is in the sales conversation, your job is really just to uncover these feelings or logical experience that the prospect is having. So if you were to ask them questions about their current experience and they were telling you these things that you've written down on your island exercise, you've actually started to map out their gap with a high degree of accuracy. And the reason why we do this island exercise is because it's hard to ask questions about outcomes or problems if we don't know what those outcomes and problems are. And this process exists whether you are a sales rep, whether you're a coach or a consultant. If you're on an offer, if you're selling an offer, your prospects, either in a business space or a personal space, they are still going to have problems, and they are still going to have things that suck about their situation before deploying your solution. In the B2B context, there's a little bit more nuance that goes into feelings, because we don't necessarily ask the person, how do you feel about not having the service? We have to get a little bit more nuance, which is beyond this training, but they still have that emotion going on. So whether you are selling a B2B solution or a B2C solution, we still need to balance the left and the right brain. So we're going to also go through the other side, and we're going to classify these answers that we've made into logic and emotion. So high conversion is conceptual, so it's logical. It's a high conversion is not something inside of you. It's something that exists outside of you. High confidence is something you feel. Extra dollars to go on holidays is an external concept. It's outside of you, logical. Sales would feel natural and enjoyable. It's emotional. Repeatable, measurable process. That's logical. Sales results are inconsistent. It's logical. How they feel about their sales results being inconsistent or their sales results being consistent would be different. They might feel content, relief, joyful, excited. These would be the emotions. So I'm just going to take a pause there, as this is our sort of core concept. And if you have any questions about what we've covered so far, I was going to open up the floor, and you can either put it in chat or you can just ask me directly, and I'll give you a couple of minutes now or forever hold your peace. All right. I will take your silence, as this makes perfect sense, and you're an incredible teacher, Kevin, and you've covered all bases. Well, thank you very much. I appreciate it. So I'm not going to get into the 3 levels of sales today. I think it's a little bit advanced for where we are. So let's talk about question structure. So right now, it's all well and good as we understand the actual model itself. We understand how a sale occurs. What needs to happen in our buyer's mind in order for them to take action. And so how do we ask questions in order to elicit those responses? And I want to introduce you to my favorite question framework, which is the CDE framework, which means curious, define, and elaborate. And so in order for this question framework to work, we have to have no assumptions about the answer. We need to define the terms of their question and then get them to elaborate. And the funniest way to convey the CDE method is the memes of Jordan Peterson, where someone asks him something and then he's like, but the question that you're asking is not the question, because the real question is, what are the presuppositions of the question and the symptoms of those presuppositions within your question? And everyone laughs at him because he has word salad. But effectively, one of the things that Jordan Peterson does, and that either frustrates people or impresses people, is that he won't answer a question directly, because he's always trying to define the terms of the question. He's always asking, what do you mean when you say that? And you probably can even hear his voice. What do you mean when you say that? And this is actually a really good way to approach sales, because the origin of all mistakes is assumption. And so whenever it comes to a sales conversation, the first thing that I do on most of the calls that I review is I'm usually grilling the salesperson or the coach. It's like, why did you not ask about that? Why did you not get clearer on what they said? A really good example of this is like, if somebody says to me, And let's say we open up the sales conversation, and I would open up the sales conversation like this and say, hey, thank you so much for booking in. What's going on and what led you to book in with us today? And they might say, I'm not making enough sales. And so if we look at, I'm not making enough sales, there's a few things here that we A, need to get curious about, and B, need to define, and then C, elaborate on. So I'm not making enough sales. So what does enough sales mean? So we want to get curious about that, and we want to define it. So my next question becomes, what does enough sales look like or mean? So we take another example of, someone comes in and says, I'm feeling, or I'm not enjoying selling my services, or maybe I'm feeling salesy, so I'm avoiding sales conversations. So when I hear this question, I'm automatically going to my framework of curious, define, and elaborate. So I'm feeling salesy, so I'm avoiding sales conversations. So the two questions I have is, what do you mean by salesy? And what do you mean by avoiding sales conversations? And so the interesting thing about this process is most people are worried about what to say next rather than what did your prospect just say? And pretty much in every sales conversation I listen to, the prospect is giving you everything that you need, all the ammunition you need for the sale, and exactly what they say. It's that we don't listen hard enough, and we don't get curious and define what they mean by the things that they say, which sounds so simple when we say it out loud, but it's actually very difficult to do in live. It's a skill that needs to be developed in live practice. And so when we say, what do you mean by salesy? Or what does enough sales look like? We're getting them to define their answer, define their problem. And so the next step after that is to elaborate. So define your problem, which is, what does enough sales look like? Okay, so I'm not making enough sales at the moment. We're only making 3 to 4 sales. And so I'll go back to my framework, curious. Okay, is there anything I can be curious in this framework right now? We're only making 3 to 4 sales a month. Okay, 3 to 4 sales a month. What does 3 to 4 sales a month look like in terms of revenue? So we're getting them to define what they mean by 3 to 4 sales. Why is that a problem? And they might say, it's like $2,000 to $3,000 a month. Okay, so now we have an answer that is clear. Right now, they're only making 3 to 4 sales a month. They're only doing $2,000 to $3,000 a month. So when we elaborate, we can then say, well, how do you want it to look like? So that takes us out of the problem now into the future. And they can start telling us things like, I want to be doing twice as many. And we would apply the same logic. What does twice as many mean? So no assumptions here. Twice means 6 to 8 sales and 4 to 6K. So this CDE framework is all about no assumptions, defining terms, getting them to elaborate, and then asking them how they want it to be instead. And the beautiful thing is they will be giving you everything that you need in their answers for you to elaborate on and define on. And this is why we don't necessarily need scripts. We just need a framework. We just need a framework, which is what's going on now and where do they expect that they would be by now. That is the origin of all sales. And so if we ask someone what's going on now, and we define it, we get curious about it, we elaborate and see where they want to be instead, we're going to start naturally building that gap, and they're going to naturally want to close that gap. So this is our curious, define, elaborate question framework, which is no assumptions. So we assume nothing. We do not assume that we know what they mean by what they say. We get them to define the terms of their question. What does not enough mean? And then we get them to elaborate on that. What do you want it to look like instead? CDE. Okay. So we have about 10 minutes left. So I'm going to get to what do we then do after we have our gap built, right? So right now we should have our island exercise done. We should know the difference between emotion and logic. We should be able to build a gap where they are now and where they want to be through the question, through the curious, define, elaboration. So how do we actually get them to sell themselves to us? And so this is what we call reverse selling. This is how we get our prospects to sell themselves to us. And we put this through a couple of phases. So the first one is getting them to sell themselves to you, which looks like, well, at this stage, most people get overexcited and they start pitching their services. We don't want to lose all of the beautiful momentum and rapport that we built by telling people what they need without asking them what they actually want. And so people get overexcited, they ruin the momentum, and this is a mistake. Don't waste all the good work now. Let the momentum of your sales call, of this gap that you built, go through to its natural peak and climax. What we're looking for, the benchmark of excellence is, so how do I work with you? Like, this is great. Thank you. Like, you've got me really clear on the problem that I'm experiencing. I didn't think of it like that. So how do we solve this? That may feel a little bit far away, but if you really define somebody's problem, they are going to naturally ask you, okay, so what do we do about it? Like, how do we fix it? Can you help me fix it? You've helped me realize that it's costing like $3,000 to $4,000 a month. I want to make 10. Help me realize that it's inconsistent sales results. I'm not closing enough. How do we fix this? That's what we're looking for, that kind of feeling. So this is how we would do it, right? As we would transition from the discovery. So we've been in discovery period with our CDE framework and our island exercise. Now we're moving to close. And so what we would say to them is we would summarize what we found so far. So we've talked about how you were feeling uncertain, a little bit hopeless about your sales conversations. You weren't converting enough. You're only converting like 1 in 10 prospects. You were getting way too many objections, and it was costing you about $3,000 to $4,000 a month. And at the same time, we talked about how you wanted to double that revenue. You wanted to be closing at least 3 in 10 sales conversations. You wanted to be making $10,000 to $15,000 a month, and you wanted to feel confident, certain, with a repeatable, measurable sales process. Did I get all of that right? Yes. So this summary is the transition that we use before we move into the close. So it's highlighting, this is what we've talked about here. This is what we've talked about there. Did we miss anything? Most of the time they say no. Now, this is a really subtly important step, because if they say yes, they are accepting that you understand their problem. And this is such a critical piece of sales that most people forget, is if they feel like you understand their problem, they are 4 to 5 times more likely to buy your services than people that don't get that response. So you think about most traditional sales, it's like, okay, great. This is what we do. There's no emotional check-in, which is like, hey, do you feel like we got everything? Do you feel like we've ticked off all the boxes, that we've accurately diagnosed your problem? Good metaphor here is like going to the doctor. Let's say you go to the doctor and you sort of explain your symptoms, or you don't even get to explain your symptoms. And the doctor says, here's your antibiotics, do this for like 3 times a day for the next 2 weeks. You're like, but I have a sore foot and my left hand is shaking. It's like, yeah, just take antibiotics. It's fine. Antibiotics are really good for you, by the way. Antibiotics are good because of ABC. These are all the benefits of antibiotics. Yada, yada, yada. It's convincing. Well, the opposite to that is the doctor sits down with you. We have a great doctor, GP, by the way. And why was that relevant, Caleb? I don't know. We sit down with the GP. It's the best example, right? We sat down with her because we had something going on with our son. He has this like kind of eczema rash at the moment. And she sat down and she's just asking all of these questions. When does it flare up? At what time does it flare up? Does it weep? Is it crusty? Does it happen here? Is there anything that you eat that causes that? Have you tried going off dairy? Blah, blah, blah. What detergent are you using? What, blah, blah, blah. Like question. And we felt really like she understood the problem that we're experiencing. So when she presented the solution, it's like, yeah, cool, we'll do it. Now, if she hadn't, and she'd just come in, and we'd had this experience before, they're like, it's just a rash, it's fine. And that seems to be the urgent doctor. Like if we go to the urgent doctor, they're in such a hurry that they're like, it's fine. Just put the cream on, they're fine. But we don't feel understood. So if we don't feel understood, we have doubt, we feel uncertain, and we don't feel like there's closure. So this step, I know I'm farting on about it, but this is just so different to how every sales training goes, is there is no patience in the salespeople to connect with the prospect and say, do you feel like we got all of it? Yes. And this moment here, this yes, you got it, is so critical to closing the deal. Sorry. So it looks a little bit like this. So we summarize the problems. Does it sound like we got all of it? Yes. Is there anything you need to add? No, that's all of it. Is it cool if we talk about potential options right now? Now, this might sound a little like forced, but there's a really sound logic behind it, which is, does that sound like we got all of it? When they accept that question, they're accepting that we understand their problem, which is important for the reasons we talked about. Is there anything you need to add? No. Reinforcing the fact that we understand their problem, which is critical to making the sale. Is it cool if we talk about some potential options? Now, this might sound weak, but it's actually Cialdini's law of consistency and commitment, which is if we ask for permission to talk about options, we lower the sales resistance. So there's no, oh my goodness, like you're selling. Well, I just asked if it's cool if we talk about options. So we remove that sticker shock. If we ask them, is it cool if we talk about potential options? Cialdini's law of consistency and commitment is they're more likely to act in accordance with what they said previously. And so if they say, yes, it's cool to be pitched, they're saying, yes, it's cool for me to make a buying decision. So again, this is where most salespeople would ruin all the good work that they've done and they're going to pitch, but we don't do that. So this is the pivotal part too, which is what do you need from us in order to make this thing happen? So what I mean by that specifically is, let's say it's a sales training problem. Instead of me saying, this is what we do, I would say, okay, cool. So we talked about you're experiencing this, you're experiencing that. Is there anything that we missed? No, cool. Is it cool if I share some options with you? Yes, awesome. Okay. Just before I get into that, what do you think you need from me in order for us to solve this problem? How can we help you solve this problem? What do you need from us in order to make this problem go away? And so the question that you're asking is, well, why don't we just tell them? Because of what we mentioned earlier, it is more persuasive for that person to tell us what they want than it is for us to tell them what they want, because that little bullshit filter in the back of your head. I think the quote that sums us up really well is, our word is garbage, their word is gossip. So if they say, I want some coaching, I want some help, I want some one-on-one, I need some accountability, then we go, great, we can do that. Anything else? They are literally telling us what they need in order to close this problem. They are selling to us what they need, not us pitching them, which is 10 times more effective. So why do we not just tell them? Well, two reasons. One, we can create potential objections by over-prescribing solutions. Let me know if you've ever had this experience where you go in to buy something. The amount of times I've had this just infuriates the shit out of me. I cannot stand it. It's like, I just want to buy this thing. And they're just talking and talking and talking. And it's like, please, for the love of God, shut up. Just let me buy. Just, here's my money. Just stop talking. I just want the thing. And so there are people like this, but there's also salespeople who'll just say a bunch of stuff. And the person goes, well, I don't need that. That's too much. And so we create potential objections by overselling and over-prescribing. Number two, the big one, it's more persuasive for them to tell us. It's also more accurate, right? So if they say, I need this, I need this, I need this, that's way more accurate. Also, if they accept our question, they have primed themselves to recognize that there is a problem, which you talked about already. So pay particular attention to their language and use that in your response. So if they say, I need accountability, say, great, we can do accountability. They say, I need help handling objections. We say, great, we can help you handle objections. So then the next step here is, after they've told us, we want to match their answers to your product. So they tell us what they need to solve their problem. Don't be afraid to mention the things that you don't handle. So someone might come to me and say, Caleb, I need to learn how to close more sales. Oh, and by the way, can you do leadership coaching as well? I would go, no, we don't do leadership coaching. And it's okay to say that you don't do something. It actually builds more trust. And they usually go, oh, that's fine. I don't really need that anyway. Right. And so the next thing is, what if they say, I don't know, that's why I'm hiring you, or like I'm talking to you. This is still good. It means they want to buy, but they're just kind of testing you. So what we say when someone says, well, I don't know what I need to solve this problem, that's why I'm talking to you. Say, look, I have an idea and a plan. I just want to hear from you what you think you need in order to achieve the outcome that we talked about. How do you like to be coached? What do you see is going to be valuable for you to get there? They all have an idea. It's just a sneaky little test just to see if you will collapse your frame, your sales frame. And imagine like if we went to the doctor and the doctor says, how can we help? And so what do you think you would need? And you might actually say, that's why I'm talking to you. But in some sense, you're like, well, I need some medicine. And like, I just want to feel better. Like, I just want to have some kind of, I don't know what it is, but like, I just need something to help me feel better. So great, cool. We can take care of that. How much deeper to go? So let's just put a pin in this here, right? So this is how we get to the place where we have figured out our prospect's problem. We've then asked them, what do they need from us? And so we've now matched our products to their problem. They've said, I want this. We say, great, we do that. I want this. Great, we do that. So then we move into the rest of the conversation, which I'm going to give you the fast version because we've run out of time today, of how we would then transition to actually pitching. And so we call this phase 2, which is like pre-handling objections. Yeah. But this will be the shortened version of it, which is there's really only 2 questions that I would ask after we have established what problems that they have. And without going into too much detail, because this is a whole workshop in itself, we've done the step where we've asked, what do you need from us? Then we've heard them and matched our services. Then we've asked, is there anything else you might need? They go, no. We go, great. Just 2 more questions. Why is now the right time to do this? And why me? Us. So this is your like short form, easiest way to build urgency and handle the think about it objection before it comes up. We don't have time to get into the mechanics of reverse qualification. If you want some training about that, just send me an email after this. I've got another workshop that we did a whole workshop on the actual reverse qualification process, pre-handling objections. Why me and why us handles the competition objection. And so this happens just after we pitched our services. And so the simplicity in this question is we take an objection that they might have and we turn it into a question. So instead of them telling us, oh, now's not the right time, if we ask them before they say that, hey, look, just curious, like, why is now the right time to do this? They're going to tell you why now's the right time, which is way more persuasive than us waiting for that objection to come out later and then tell them that now's the right time. And same with the why me, why us, right? So we're getting them to qualify on why they trust you. Why are you the best person to do this? And the greatest mistake salespeople make is they think these questions and their simplicity makes them silly, but the simplicity is what makes them powerful. And they are asked at a specific stage for a specific reason. We don't ask these at the start. We ask these right at the end when the rapport is really high, and we get them to tell us why these objections are not objections. Then we prescribe the solution. And so prescribing the solution is really, and just really quite simple, which is we need to be certain, we need to have clear next steps, and you can even have 2 options if you want to, or just the 1 option. But the prescribing the solution is probably the next most important part that comes after the why me, why now. Great. Is it cool if we talk about how this works? Fantastic. Here's how it works. We have 2 options together. And the key thing with this prescribing solution is this is not a question. This is a statement of prescription. This is a how do you use the antibiotics? So we have 2 options for you. 1, you can do a self-paced option where you learn by yourself, you go through our course. Or 2, we have a done with me process where I will install this with you over the next 8 to 12 weeks. Do you have a preference? So if you have 2 options, you can do that. If you only have 1 option, you would just say, great. So we have this package and it works in 3 phases. So what I would actually use the price up front. So I would say, this is the done with you package. It's $4,000 and this is how it works. Now, the reason why I suggest saying price up front is because if it's not there, the only thing they're going to be thinking about throughout your whole pitch when you're explaining what you do is how much does it cost, right? They want to do it. They're going to be sitting there going, can I afford it? How much does it cost? Shit. So set up front, right? So it's the X package. It's $4,000. And this is how it works. Phase 1, we onboard you. Phase 2, we develop your sales process. Phase 3, we start coaching advanced concepts. And you can make these phases a little bit stronger. Like if I was saying this, I'll go through what I do with the one-on-one client. So I'd say, hey, look, we basically it's a 12-week program. We install this with you. It's $4,000 for me to walk you through the process. Phase 1, we're going to onboard you and we're going to look at your existing sales process and we're going to audit what's not working. Phase 2, we're going to start building the actual cognitive dissonance process and installing it with you. And then phase 3, we start stress testing it, optimizing it for your market so that you can close more deals. All we need to get started is either a deposit or the first payment. You can pay in full or via installment. Does it sound good to you? And so it's a prescription that I am very certain. I've said it 1,000 times. And so and this is what you would need to work on is what are your phases? And the phases are deliberate because people are asking themselves the question, which is, how does this work? They don't need logistics. They don't need, and on day 3, we do blah. They just need phases. Right? So phase 1 is diagnostic. Phase 2 is building. Phase 3 is optimization. And it's deliberately high level in the pitch. We can get into granular detail afterwards when we're handling objections. But from a pitch perspective, it's just, here's how we deliver your outcome on a bird's eye view, on a high level. We're not getting into the granular detail. So that actually, and then we can go, question concerns. And this is the thing about objections at the end. It's like, well, they'll ask you a bunch of questions, right? And they'll say, well, what about this? And what about that? And then we just talk to them like adults. And we just, okay, cool. Yeah. And then we ask the sale again. Should we kick things off? Do you want to get things started? If they still say I need to think about it, we could go watch the objection class and I talk about, I need to think about it. But yeah, effectively, any of those objections are just fears that there's something underneath. But again, way past this workshop, it's in another one. So yeah, we are 10 minutes past the hour, so we've got a little bit overtime. I just wanted to tie that off. So you should have, basically by the end of today, you should understand what a sale is, which is the cognitive dissonance. You should have the island exercise to help craft your sales process. You have the CDE framework to ask questions. You have the getting them to sell themselves to you through reverse selling. And then you have a mini version of objection handling, why me, why now? And then you have the pitch. So you should have, by the end of today, everything you need to make sales. Any questions?
I have two.
Yeah, go for it.
I posted it on the chat, but I'll ask it here. What happens if the person I'm talking with isn't making the final decision and has to run it up the chain before he or she can make a final decision? And what if they can't answer the why me, why us question because they're still sort of, they don't know, they haven't done their homework or they haven't talked to other people like me in my line of work, what is it that I can ask them instead?
Oh, sorry. I just saw your questions come in now. I didn't have the chat open. Sorry, mate.
That's okay.
So that's a really good question regarding like if there's multiple decision makers, it changes the sales process a little bit because each decision maker has their own cognitive dissonance. So they have their own problem. So we still establish the problem for this person, but we don't necessarily close them as hard. So if they say things like, it's got to go up the chain, it actually changes the way we sell, which is we want to know, do they feel confident conveying or on selling our services to somebody up the line? So when you have like a multi-stage decision-making process, it's actually a little bit less about selling and more about handling decision makers up the line. So that usually happens in a B2B context. If you send me an email after this, I'll send you the B2B class that I did on like how we do this. But yeah, so basically it's about number one, if you know in advance that you're dealing with a company, you want to map the decision-making, the stakeholders. So it's like you're talking to person number one, they're likely to talk to a CFO or like a director, which means you need to understand like what problem does the person you're talking to, which could be an HR manager, they have a different problem than the CFO who just wants to see dollars on spreadsheets. Really good example of this. I have a startup in Australia that I'm working with, and I was speaking to the sales manager, and the sales manager has perceived problems that she wants me to run workshops on. And her motivation is to get her team engaged. But the CFO who is making the decision just really cares about the dollars. So I had one proposal for the sales manager and another proposal for the CFO, which was more finance related. Okay. Yeah. So like that's on a B2B example. Yeah.
That does make sense. I'm in the process right now of speaking with somebody, in fact, tomorrow, because when I called and spoke with her, she said, I'm going to have to talk to my manager before we make a decision. So what could I have said to her or asked her about that message transference between her and her manager that would make her manager go, yeah, this is a no-brainer. You have to do it right now, versus him hemming and hawing about the cost, which is, of course, going to be exactly as you said, whether it's a manager or a CFO, it's the same thing. They're looking at numbers at the end of the day. And I want to know, how do I bridge that, that chasm, essentially?
You have a lot less control when there's multiple decision makers. So in the perfect world, we can speak to the manager, but that often doesn't happen. So your goal becomes less about how do I close this person to how do I create an advocate? So how do I create someone that loves us and our product that will fight for me when I'm not in the room?
Got it.
So that means the sales process itself is not a hard sell.
Mhm.
It's a real focus on what does she need? What is motivating her? Why does she want to do this? Why does she need it? So everything we talked about in the first half is super relevant.
Yep.
Then what you want to do is you want to sort of name the elephant in the room, which is like, obviously it's got to go to the manager. What do you need from me in order to help you on sell this?
Got it. Okay.
So it's like, how do you guys work as a team against the manager? Right? Because if she's speaking to you and she likes you, likely wants to do it. So it's then about how can you equip her to be able to convey your services to the manager who's going to be looking at just top line numbers. But I would say the most leverage you have in that conversation is building the relationship with her. And this is what I say with everyone in the B2B space. It's actually about relationship building with the first person. If you have multi-state decision-making
Okay.
process, because that person will fight for you
Okay.
if they like you.
Yeah. So it sounded like she likes me, and she made it sound like her manager was not going to be the decision maker.
Yeah.
When I spoke with her again after a week of just sort of waiting, because we hadn't really made a decision about when to go over the proposal again, I heard from her and say, I need to send this up to my manager. She's going to have to decide. So I don't know what's going on. Maybe there is some conversation that's happening, but I haven't really figured out exactly what I should be able to do tomorrow, because I have a call tomorrow scheduled with her tomorrow to talk to her about this. Uh, what would your advice be to just sort of see where it could go next?
Is this your first call with her?
No, this would be my third call with her. Third call with her
Okay.
tomorrow.
So it's not really a discovery call. She kind of
No,
knows about your services.
she knows about the services. She led me to believe that she really needs to move quickly on this.
Yep.
And then I said, well, that's great. Let's figure out exactly when we can schedule this. And then she started to say, well, I need to just get this okayed by the manager. I said, fine. And then she dropped off completely. And then I picked up the phone and just called her. I said, just curious to know whether you're still interested in these headshots, portraits. And she said, well, I haven't had a chance to talk to my manager. I've been busy, blah, blah, blah. So I said, let's circle back on Friday. I talked to her on Monday. And she said, I'm going to be talking to him this afternoon. I don't want to say what time, can I call you like right after? None of that stuff. I said, let's talk on Friday. We will have some answers then, So I have a call scheduled for tomorrow at 10 o'clock. So
Yeah, look, you're handling it the right way. So with the B2B stuff, it's very much like you're trying to work as a team. So it's lots of like, so what would you like me to do from here? Would you like me if I catch up with you in maybe like a couple of weeks? We're never trying to, in a B2B space, pressure the person to make a decision because they can't make a decision. And nothing that we say is going to help them make a decision faster. Like
excellent.
there are certain realities that sales can't overcome. Like if there's a multi-decision making, it actually works in a neck. So you can send it to her. You can say, look, the last thing I want to be is a pain in the ass, which is filling you up all the time. So, let me know what you need in order to make this happen. I would love to work with you guys. Blah, blah, blah. Yeah. And when should I connect with you again? Maybe in another week or another couple of days, etc. So it's permission-based follow-up and just understanding that in a multi-decision making process, you don't have a lot of leverage. Yeah. If they can't answer why me, why us, I think you mentioned this scenario here. Just skip it. Yeah. So again, B2B is more nuanced and just in a B2B space, just skip it.
I'll send you an email about the training on the B2B stuff if you have it. Email.
Yeah, I do. It's just email me so I remind. I have a 6-month-old. I'm not sleeping a lot. So I might say this and then I might not remember. So just say Caleb B2B and I'll send you the workshop recording.
Excellent. Thank you.
All right, team. Thank you so much for today. Thank you for coming live. I hope you got some value from today's session, and recording will be up probably within 24 hours and you'll get a copy. And we'll see you in the next one. Take care, everyone.
Thanks, Caleb. Take care. Bye.